In the half-light of a British dawn, when the world was still shaking the dust of war from its coat, there was a motorcycle that did not roar for attention. It exhaled, a low, cultivated pulse, like a baritone clearing his throat before delivering a sonnet. Riders of the age described it as smooth as poured cream, strong as a clenched fist, and yet today its name drifts like a half-remembered rumor. The Ariel Square 4 MK2, a gentleman's superbike, born at the very moment Britain forgot how to dream big. It was not a machine built for the cafe racer crowd or the speed-hungry youths who carved their names into London's North Circular. This was a motorcycle for men who carried leather gloves rather than racing scars, a bike for the rider who valued dignity over bravado, depth over spectacle. And yet beneath that polished restraint, beneath the hand-lined tank and the quiet hum, lay something far more radical. 4 cylinders, arranged in a perfect square, a Turner-designed engine architecture unlike anything else on British roads. By the time the MK2 arrived in 1950, the nation was in flux. Britain was rebuilding, rationing was still in effect, and the idea of luxury felt almost scandalous. Motorcycle News wrote that year that the British rider now seeks reliability with refinement, a subtle nod to a public weary of machine shop harshness. Ariel, proud, independent, often stubborn, believed it could deliver both. And under the BSA umbrella, the company suddenly found itself with just enough resources to chase ambition again. The MK2 became the embodiment of that ambition. It was not merely updated, it was reimagined. New alloy heads, improved cooling fin geometry, revised crankcases, a redesigned frame that offered touring stability with the whisper of hidden athleticism. It weighed nearly as much as a small car of its day, yet could surge forward with a velvety thrust no single cylinder or parallel twin could emulate. Period testers remarked that the power delivery felt like a hand placed firmly against your back, guiding rather than pushing. On the streets of Birmingham, it turned heads not because it was loud, but because it was unusual. A motorcycle that looked like a stately tourer but behaved quietly, politely, like Britain's last pre-war superbike. And in an era obsessed with rugged austerity, the Square 4 dared to be civilized. From the very beginning, the Square 4 was an engineer's rebellion disguised as a businessman's machine. Edward Turner, years before Triumph would become his kingdom, first sketched the concept not as a gesture of extravagance, but as a solution. Britain in the 1930s needed smoothness without bulk, power without vibration. A 4-cylinder engine would provide it, but a 4-cylinder inline layout was too long for a motorcycle chassis, and a V4 was too complex for mass production. Turner's idea was audacious. Arrange 4 cylinders in a perfect square, 2 crankshafts geared together, compact enough to fit where a twin would normally live. By the time the MK2 emerged in 1950, Turner's brainchild had matured. The original cast-iron head had been retired, replaced with a full alloy top end that shimmered beneath the tank like a silver organ pipe. The cooling issues of the earlier models, real but exaggerated by rumor, were addressed through deeper fins, better air passages, and subtle changes to exhaust routing. In its technical notes from that year, Ariel described the new engine as cooler running and freer breathing, understated words that concealed the magnitude of improvement. This was no simple revision. It was a resurrection. The chassis, too, revealed a quiet confidence. A deep, almost architectural frame cradled the 4-cylinder block with a sense of ceremony. The telescopic forks, borrowed from Triumph's wartime advances, gave the front end a more composed stance, while the rear plunger suspension remained, smoothing Britain's post-war roads with a gentle, almost floating grace. Test riders from the motorcycle wrote that the MK2 seems to erase the road rather than confront it, an experience as much psychological as mechanical. Twist the throttle, and the MK2 spoke with a cultured note. Not the thump of a single, nor the buzz of a twin, but a low-frequency hum, rich and warm, like a quartet tuned to the same pitch. It built speed with a sense of inevitability, the 997 cubic centimeter power plant delivering its thrust in a smooth, unbroken swell. 70 miles per hour felt effortless. 80 was well within reach. And yet the Ariel did not demand speed. It merely allowed it, like a gentleman permitting himself a rare indulgence. In the early years of the decade, Britain's motorcycling culture was shifting. Young riders gravitated toward lighter Triumphs and Nortons, machines that promised thrills for less money. But the man who bought a Square 4 wasn't looking for thrills. He wanted presence. He wanted the long-distance composure of a touring machine with the sophistication of a fine instrument. The MK2 gave him both. And yet, for all its quiet majesty, the Square 4 MK2 carried a weight heavier than its curb mass, the expectations of a changing industry. Ariel, now absorbed into the sprawling BSA group, found itself navigating a corporate landscape where individuality was both a blessing and a burden. BSA wanted profitability, Ariel wanted identity, and the Square 4, hand-assembled, intricate, expensive, was becoming an outlier in a market that increasingly favored speed, simplicity, and volume. The rivals circled early in the decade. Vincent's Black Shadow cast a long, fearsome shadow with its apocalyptic performance figures and stark charisma. The Triumph Thunderbird, and later the T110, delivered big twin muscle at a price that sharpened competition. And Norton's featherbed-framed twins were rewriting the rulebook of handling. Against this backdrop, the MK2 was a different kind of creature, more refined, more mature. Some testers admired this distinction, noting in motorcycling that the Ariel rider seeks dignity rather than dramatics. Others, more bluntly, called it a gentleman's express in an age that prefers street fighters. The most persistent shadow over the Square 4 was the myth of overheating. Early versions had indeed run hot under heavy loads, a side effect of packing 4 cylinders into a silhouette meant for 2. But by the 1950 MK2 revision, Ariel's engineering team had meticulously addressed the issue. Deeper fins, better alloy metallurgy, improved oil circulation. In factory correspondence from 1951, an engineer remarked that the temperature anxiety now belongs more to rumor than reality. Still, rumors have a way of outpacing truth. Anxious riders repeated old tales, competitors quietly encouraged them, and myths, once established, cling to machines like dust to oil. But something more subtle was shifting. The British rider of the mid-1950s no longer aspired to the kind of refined luxury the Square 4 represented. Roads were improving. Riders were younger. Cafe racer culture crackled through London and Birmingham. Britain wanted speed, noise, rebellion, not elegance. And though the MK2 could outrun many of its rivals in the right hands, it refused to shout about it. It refused to be anything but refined. Inside Ariel, the pressure grew. Production costs climbed. The Square 4 demanded precision that a mass production system struggled to maintain. Each unit required a craftsman's attention. Each component seemed to ask, "Are you sure?" The company had to choose, chase modern trends or continue supporting a flagship that appealed to a shrinking clientele. In 1959, the decision arrived quietly, without fanfare. The final Square 4 rolled from the Selly Oak works, a machine as poised as the first, its 4 cylinders humming with the same dignified confidence. There was no parade, no ceremony, just the last exhale of a motorcycle that had never tried to dominate the world, only to elevate it. To ride a Square 4, truly ride it, is to understand why its legend survives in whispers rather than shouts. The experience begins with the gentle rocking of the engine at idle, a subtle movement born of 2 crankshafts turning in harmony. Twist the throttle, and the hum deepens into a sustained, velvety note. There is no harshness, no metallic protest, just a smooth, rising swell, like the steady breath of a living creature. On the move, the Mk2 carries itself with the composure of a fine touring car. The front forks trace the road with deliberate calm. The plunger rear end, though old-fashioned even by mid-1950s standards, absorbs imperfections with a fluid, almost nautical sway. And the engine, Turner's square-chambered masterpiece, delivers a wave of torque that feels more like a long, unbroken glide than an acceleration. Veteran riders often describe the sensation the same way. You do not push the Square 4, you invite it forward. It is a motorcycle built not for aggression, but for presence. For the rider who preferred to slip through the countryside rather than carve it open. For the gentleman who valued the quiet confidence of a machine that needed no theatrics to prove itself. This subtlety is what doomed it. By the late 1950s, the British motorcycle industry was tightening around a new ideal. Bikes had to be lighter, sharper, cheaper to build, easier to maintain. Manufacturers chased racing victories to sell road machines. Engineers sought to wring more horsepower from simpler designs. The cafe racer age was upon them, and the Square 4, despite its power, could never be stripped, hardened, or modernized without losing the essence that defined it. Ariel attempted updates, but the cost of hand-fitting the dual crankshaft engine grew untenable. BSA executives scrutinized the balance sheets. Younger riders dismissed the bike as old men's luxury, and in a competitive market, myths about heat and complexity became convenient excuses to overlook what was, at its heart, a technical triumph of British ingenuity. When the final Mk2 left Selly Oak in 1959, it marked more than the end of a model line. It marked the end of a belief that Britain could build refined 4-cylinder motorcycles without sacrificing soul. That innovation could coexist with dignity. That smoothness could be engineered with elegance rather than brute force. And so the Square 4 became a ghost. But ghosts endure. Today, when one emerges from a barn or appears at an auction, the atmosphere shifts. People approach with reverence, not curiosity. They run fingers along the alloy fins, recognizing the craftsmanship before understanding the mechanics. They listen to the idle, a soft, resonant pulse unlike any other British motorcycle, and feel the echo of a vanished era. Each surviving machine is a reminder that greatness is not always loud, nor celebrated, nor even understood in its own time. Sometimes, greatness is built quietly, carried with grace, and rediscovered only after the world has rushed past. The Ariel Square 4 Mk2 stands among those rare machines, not merely a motorcycle, but a chapter of engineering audacity shaped into metal and motion. It is the last great gentleman's superbike of Britain, not because it won races or captured headlines, but because it dared to define refinement as a kind of power, a power that still lingers long after the roads it once ruled have changed beyond recognition. If stories like this resonate with you, feel free to leave a comment, like, and subscribe. There are many more forgotten machines waiting in the shadows.